So yeah, let's start by let's start a little bit of it with some background on you. Can you give me in a nutshell who Frank is and how you came to this point where you're, you know, imparting some priceless advice for agency leaders and other marketers at large that run their own businesses and are struggling to scale?
Yeah, great question. So I'm Frank Cowell. I'm the chief revenue boss of Revenue Ranch, which is a education and consulting firm for owners of professional services firms, agencies, and whatnot. And prior to this, I had spent 18 plus years in the agency game. Back when I started it, which was in 2004. So it's almost about 20 years ago, believe it or not. We didn't really refer to our types of businesses as agencies. Really, the only firms that were referring to themselves as agencies were kind of the large, very traditional ad agency kind of businesses. And web shops and content shops and ad shops, online ads, weren't really referring to themselves as agencies. But over time, that kind of started to become the moniker that all of us adopted. And you would have different flavors of that, of course, whether you were a development agency, a content agency, creative agency, and whatnot. But back when I started out, I was primarily doing website development and then branding work, and really had morphed my agency into a full service creative firm. And along that journey, I did some things really well, and I did some things that were not done so well. Made a lot of mistakes on that journey. And so I like to say that, my best lessons come from the things that I did wrong and the ways in which I kind of derailed myself. And I try to be very honest and transparent with people and my clients when I work with them, that I want them to understand that all of the success stories you hear, the vast majority of what you don't hear is all the stuff that went wrong and all the derailment that happened. And I'm very clear about that. That's just a real part of the journey. So I learned a ton by doing things wrong. I learned a few things by doing some things right. And one of the things that I learned along the way was this idea of laser focusing in on your business strategy. In other words, the business strategy and how sharp you make that determines how easy of a time your business will grow or not grow, or how easy it will be or how difficult it will be. And I started to realize that the breadth of my service offering really was a massive limiting factor in the growth. Now, that's not to say that full service agencies can't grow. There are plenty that do. That being said, there's a very specific audience for that to make that work. And a lot of small agencies that I come across don't necessarily have the Rolodex, if you will, to use an outdated old school term, but they don't really necessarily have the Rolodex or the network to go get into the right sized accounts to be able to afford the full service model. Because the first full service model requires that you have top tier talent across many different disciplines. And so you need the margin to support that. So it can work, but there's a lot of things that you have to stick to. And a lot of small agency owners, they don't have that network. They don't have that prowess, that ability to go get into those accounts. So we could do things the hard way, or we can do things a little bit easier. And that's what I started to realize, is that I was kind of building a business model that was really going to be very difficult to scale. And so I went to work doing reflection, but also getting coaching and mentoring and studying and reading and all of these things to really dive into the business model aspect. And then the other side of that coin is the execution model. Okay. So there's the strategy side, and then there's the execution side. And so I started putting things into play into my business, and was eventually able to build, a full, robust management team, an executive team that allowed me to really step away from the business anytime I wanted. And that's what I became really passionate about. And so when I started to develop that skill, the idea of working in an agency and running an agency really wasn't my passion anymore. My passion became, how do I help others make this mindset shift and this leadership shift? How do I do that? Because that's what I was really good at. And that kind of is what led me to refining and developing my own growth system. Like they call it, sometimes refer to them as a business operating system, business growth system. That's what led me to really kind of developing my own after running a number of different systems. And so that's kind of what got me to the place where we're at today. And also, I know we're going to be talking about this idea of like 7 capabilities. And that's really what led me to this idea of 7 capabilities that every business has. And that's a core component of my growth system today.
What was the agency you worked at? You had that kind of like light bulb moment and you were like, I need to get more coaching, more training, more strategy to be able to execute better. What was that agency?
Yeah, so that was my creative agency. We were called Elevator at the time.
Okay.
And we'd gotten it, into the 7-figure arena, and that was kind of considered a level of success. And, at that time, I realized that there were a number of missing components to get to the next level. So, I did a merger with another agency. So I went through this whole process of defining what I wanted and what I was looking for. And I did an interview process with a bunch of agencies, and I found one. And so we did that, and that company became Digitopia.
Okay.
And so it was really at Digitopia where we really started to blossom and have this full system in place, this full management team, and really create a lot of autonomy for leaders. And especially myself, because that's what I was looking to do. I was really kind of looking to exit day-to-day agency work because that really wasn't where my passion was anymore. But it was in this idea of helping people create that leadership shift.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of where that whole thing was born.
So what year did you make the shift from doing that day-to-day agency work and kind of morphing into this kind of this agency life coach, strategy coach, and revenue ranch kind of became your main thing?
Yeah, that's been a journey. I would say roughly in 2015 or 2016 is when I really started to dig into strategy and execution in terms of a process for strategy and a process for execution. When I say execution, I'm talking about how you go about doing planning and management for business growth. I'm not necessarily talking about like how one places their Google ads for clients, right? To use an example. And so that journey kind of started around 2015, 2016. And, over the course of 5, 6, 7 years, really just continued to grow that process, started working with people who were just literally asking me to coach them and asking me to mentor them, and started working with a handful of folks. And then I exited my agency in 2022. I exited my agency towards the end of 2022. And because I'd already been coaching folks and whatnot, I knew that's what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to have this consulting firm where I would help people level up. And so that's when I officially formed Revenue Ranch, was in late 2022.
Thanks for the timeline clarification. That's great. Just so I can draw, the lines in the right place. I like the openness about, admitting mistakes.
I think the biggest thing when I think about making mistakes, because we all have that in our journey, I think the biggest quality an entrepreneur can have is this idea of perseverance, or what Dan Kennedy calls stick-to-itiveness. Like, how well can you just persevere? And that's one of the biggest hallmarks of success, is how long can you go with just not giving up? Now, where that can accelerate and where you can be more successful and have that happen faster is when you have a razor sharp business strategy, when the focus lens is what drives all of the activity while you're persevering. Whereas if you have just perseverance, with aimless execution, then, you might not get very far. You might be, you might have an accolade of being considered a bulldog, and that's great. That's one aspect of it. But when you compare that bulldoggedness with a focused lens on your execution, you get much further.
I like that formula. Perseverance plus aimless execution equals not success, or doesn't equal success, I guess. But perseverance with focused execution equals success. And I think that's what leads us into the capabilities. So
yeah, and if I could just make a note on that, perseverance
absolutely.
with focused execution doesn't mean there will be perfection.
No.
All that means is you're going to increase the likelihood that you're going to move in the direction of your desired destination much more successfully, right? You're going to have much more success in doing that. I think that this idea of reaching a destination point is also a fallacy. So I like to think in terms of directions, not destinations, because I think the destination thing is a trap. Because we've all heard the term the moving goalposts, right? And when we define targets like that, destinations, it becomes a moving goalpost, because I promise anyone who's listening to this, when you reach that destination, it's not going to feel like you've arrived. It's not going to feel like it's success, because there will be all sorts of new information and context telling you, well, this is not right. This is not right. This isn't perfect. It's not enough margin, not enough this, not. And so there will never be this place of like, let's let our shoulders relax because we're focused on a destination. Rather, if we focus on direction and we focus on a state of being and becoming, we could be much more satisfied on the journey, right? I'd much rather hear a business owner say, an agency owner say, our direction is to become the most effective at filling lead pipelines for dentists than anyone else in the world. I'd much rather hear that than someone saying, we need to be doing, 5 million a year in order for us to be successful, or 10 million. That's fine to set that target, but I promise when you get to 5, there's going to be a reason why that's not good enough. There will be a reason. When you get to 10, there will be a reason why that's not good enough. So I like directions, and then targets. I like targets to actually be short-term. So long-term directions, short-term targets. And then I have a whole rant about goals and objectives. So when I talk about direction, we're actually talking about a goal. And the vast majority of the business world uses the word goal wrong, in my opinion. So a goal is a direction. It's long-term, it's driving sentiment. Objective is the measurement. So when someone says, what's your goal? Our goal is to do $1 million this year, $10 million this year. I like to provide my input that that's not the goal, that's the objective. The goal might be what I described earlier, which is to be the absolute best in the world at filling lead pipelines for dentists, for example. And by the way, that never ends. There's no day where you say you don't want that to be. So the very best goals oftentimes don't ever end. You think about Walt Disney wanted to develop the happiest place on earth. That's the goal today. It's still the goal today. It doesn't end. He wanted to be open by July 17th, 1955. That was an objective, not a goal. And so that's what I'm really passionate about, is like getting people to focus on directions, not destinations.
Yeah. So it's strategy versus KPI, basically. When you think about direction, it's more of the grander core value, core objective.
It's why versus what?
What? Yes, exactly. And it's more of a mentality of being in the now than always looking ahead to, like you said, because the goalposts keep shifting. So to take this kind of analogy, is living with that direction in mind, but always being rooted in what are we doing today that can keep us on that track to success, right? To what we defined as our objective, as our direction. Is my understanding correct? Am I a little bit off base?
Yeah, I think the only thing that I would add as a refinement there is when we execute day to day and we're aiming for a target, the target should be very near term.
Yeah.
Because we need to click in on a regular basis and say, did we achieve it? Okay. If not, what's our little tweak? Did we achieve it? What's our little tweak? It's about clicking every 90 days or so. Okay.
Yep.
From a targeting standpoint. When you set those targets, you should then, much like you would do when you calibrate with a compass, you stop at a certain point. So this is what we did when I was in the Marine Corps. They taught us how to use a compass, right? Like we all look at these things and go like, oh, it's just north is that way. But there's an actual way to use this. It's called shooting your azimuth, right? So like you shoot your direction based on the map and based on the terrain you're looking at. You aim, you shoot at a point, and then what you do is you count out your paces and you go a certain distance. And that distance is pretty standardized. It's based on, you measure out your footwork and your footsteps and you'll know when you've gone that distance. And what you're supposed to do is stop. And then you shoot your direction again and you recalibrate. And so that's what we're talking about, is the goal is the far off direction. The objective is moving a certain number of kilometers and stopping and saying, did we get there in the time allotted? Did we get there with the health that we wanted? Did we get there? Is everybody still intact? And are we at the point we thought we would be at? That's the difference, right? So a goal is really the long-term direction. And then the objective is the specific target along the way. And so really important to think about that is, for example, when I help my clients define goals for the year, all we're saying is, what's the sentiment of what needs to improve or advance in the year? So there really is no measurement associated with that. So for example, someone might say, we really want to improve the client experience in our offering area, our service offering area. One of the goals is to improve the client experience. And we know we need to do that because that's going to increase retention and satisfaction and all those other things, which means it increases our gross profit. Great. We have enough justification to know that's the goal. For the quarter, what is a measurable thing we can do towards improving the client experience? Does that make sense? You say, okay, this quarter, we're going to build in this onboarding experience and we're going to aim to improve retention by 2%. Right? Yeah. So there's our marker. There's our objective.
Perfect. That's a great explanation. I think totally makes sense. 7 capabilities. Let's get into it. We're about halfway point here. I think that's a great time to approach a subject. Now that we've talked about, direction, development, goals. I'm an agency leader, for example. I'm not, but let's say I am. Yeah. And I find all this overwhelming. And this is where I feel like that I'm persevering, but I'm not getting through that plateau and I'm not scaling my operations to the point that I want to be. And I think this is where your thought process regarding 7 capabilities comes into play. Can you kind of draw the frame around how that works and why people in an agency leader position should consider that framework?
Yeah. So when we talk about the 7 capabilities, what we're talking about doing is looking at your business through the lens of entrepreneurship. Okay. So this is an entrepreneurial lens. This is not the lens of I'm the CEO or I'm the founder. This is an entrepreneur. And so for folks that are listening and folks that might read this, what I want you to do is I want you to just, for a moment, view yourself as the entrepreneur of the business, not the worker in the business or the owner or the founder. You're the entrepreneur. And so what your job is to bring about these 7 capabilities in this business you happen to own. So the thought exercise I often give my clients is, you're not allowed to work in this business that you happen to own. With that, let's go forward. Okay. So as a thought exercise, you're not allowed to work in the business, but you have to bring about, as the entrepreneur, as the shareholder, you have to bring about these 7 capabilities. These 7 capabilities align with It's just a renaming of the 7 core business functions, and I'll rattle those off to you. So the 7 core business functions we're used to seeing on an org chart are CEO, COO, and that's stacked on top of each other. And then who reports to the CEO are the other 5 executive team members. So you have marketing, sales, operations, admin, and finance. Now, whether or not you have specific leaders and employees heading up each of those 7 functions actually doesn't matter. Those still exist in your business, even if you have someone wearing multiple hats. Even if you had no idea that you should have a head of administration as a core function, that function, that need still exists. So what I do is I tell my people, I want you to not think about the job titles of those functions. And I want you to think about the purpose of those functions. Why do those exist? Why do those exist in your business? Why are they there? What are they supposed to bring about? And the answer to that question are the 7 capabilities. So I'm going to rattle them off for you. CEO, why does that role exist? That role exists to define a true north strategy and make sure that there's only an aligned and driven team of professionals aligned to that strategy. That's it. Their job is to set the business strategy to true north and make sure that nobody gets on that team and stays on that team unless they're a true north compatible individual. Does that make sense? That's the whole purpose of CEO, okay? Especially in small companies, right? But even in big companies where they're now doing more external things, that person's responsible for what's our true north and how do we make sure only people that are true north compatible get on this team, okay? COO, right? The chief operating officer, which is also oftentimes can be called president or can be called GM, right? To use another popular term, it could be called the integrator, but that is your second in command. That is the general manager, the president, right? The COO. So what's that person's or that function's purpose? It's to attain exceptional execution with the planning and management towards true north. So that person says, okay, Mr. or Mrs. CEO, who's defined the true north now, my job is to make sure that we have plans and management protocol that take us towards true north consistently. So they manage the leaders below and make sure there's a process to take us towards true north methodically every single quarter. So they manage that execution. Okay. That's their purpose, exceptional execution. Now let's think about marketing. Well, the whole purpose of marketing is to develop programs and activities that result in active lead generation. So active lead generation is that capability. That business has to be able to say, yes, we have the capability of active lead generation, meaning the word active, people are raising their hand saying, I want to talk to you. I want the appointment. I want the quote. I want the proposal. I want the audit, whatever it is. That's the first engagement. That's the whole purpose of that role. Okay. That's the capability, active lead generation. Sales, their job is to put in a systematic sales process so that way prospects turn into opportunities and opportunities turn into clients at a predictable, effective rate. Okay. So that's the process. And oh, by the way, doesn't require the owner or founder to be involved. They may be involved, but it doesn't require that they're involved. That's when you have a systematic sales process. The next one, administration. Well, what's the whole purpose there? Well, it's to create an empowered work experience that allows our people to be the best they can be, both personally and professionally, right? So empowered work experience. That's the whole point. So everything you do with your IT, everything you do with your office, if you have one, the equipment you provide people, how the benefits package is structured, how you go about establishing a career development protocol for everyone in the company, that's the empowered work experience. So when I see companies that grow and they continue to keep those activities kind of shoved under finance, that tells me they're not thinking of that capability as a strategic advantage. But the companies that view that as a strategic advantage go much further. So that one is empowered work experience. And then finally, finance. Why does that role exist? Why does that function exist? Well, the capability you're trying to achieve there is cash and profit optimization. So for the organization to receive timely insights and reporting that create cash and profit optimization. So those are the 7 capabilities. And what you do is you look at each one of those and you determine, where do you have the biggest blocker to growth right now? Okay. Where do you have the biggest blocker to growth? And that is what we would call a momentum analysis. Where is your biggest blocker to growth momentum? And then once you have that, you just methodically chip away at that quarter by quarter. And so you asked about being overwhelmed. And so the key thing is, you're not trying to boil the ocean. You're not trying to solve every blocker in every capability area. What you want to do is find out what's the one that's holding us up the most right now, and you chip away at that one. And then as you grow an executive team, as you have more people participating in this process, you can tackle more blockers. But the reality is if you have a limited executive team size, well, then you're going to be limited in the number of major blockers you're going to tackle every quarter. So it requires that you just work on the right things in the right order and just chip away at it. And every quarter, be confident and be proud that you have chipped away at those things.
So you mentioned that, those 7 capabilities don't need to have a single person attached to them. Although, in bigger enterprises or like enterprise level agencies, they might, and sometimes they might have 2 people that are in charge of, sales, or multiple people that are part of a marketing team and so on. But these are, we're talking about these in sort of a group setting, whether they have a person attached to them or not.
Well, so let me clarify that.
So that's what I want to make sure we understand properly.
Yeah. There needs to be one name on each of those 7 capabilities. There must be one name. When you start looking at your business this way, you have to define the one name that is responsible for bringing that capability to this business. That's the entrepreneurial lens you want to give and teach to your executive team, is that their job is to bring this capability to life for the business entity. What I meant earlier about that you may not have a name here or there, what I meant is that you may not have those job titles specifically defined, but someone is responsible for bringing that capability to life. So what you'll find in smaller businesses is, the founder might have their name in 4 of those capabilities or 5 of those capabilities. But one of the things that's important to start adopting is to know who is currently responsible for that. And it should be one name, not more than one, right? One person is responsible for bringing that capability to life. Now, the entrepreneurial lens, if you're the founder, is, okay, I'm now on a journey to start replacing my name from each of these capabilities. My responsibility to this business is to go find people who are amazing at bringing that capability to life for a business, and go put those people in those seats.
Make sure they're aligned to your true north vision, to your true north strategy. If you're like the leader or the CEO or the founder, you set that true north. You don't want to wear 4 hats anymore because you're overwhelmed, or you need to scale and you need more people involved. So you find the right individuals that reflect your vision and have the capacity to fill that role.
Yeah. So when you find people either at the executive level or any level in the company, what we want to do is we want to find people who match our core values. And that's another part of business strategy that we didn't talk about yet.
Yeah.
But core values are part of True North. So you want to find people that match the core values, and you want to find people that are excited about the vision that you have and the mission you've established in your True North, right? So you want to find people who are excited about that, who are aligned to it, and then match your core values. In terms of their day-to-day execution, that's where you need the other side of strategy, which is the execution process. How do you go about gathering that team on a quarterly basis in a rhythm of planning and then managing the execution of that plan? So That methodical approach is the job, like gathering the team to be effective in that process. But make no mistake, what you don't want to do is you don't want to hire people that are like, oh, Sally probably can own our active lead generation capability because she's been doing landing pages for us and some ads for us. You want to put someone in that role that isn't just taking direction from you. You want to put somebody in that role that's actually better than you at that capability. And so this is a big challenge that founders have, is they often hire people that aren't better than them. And so then what do? They end up defining a lot of the how instead of only defining the what. So the what when you talk about COO, right? Which oftentimes founders are wearing both CEO and COO hats, right? What they should be defining what, which is things like KPIs and direction. How that gets done should be handled by competent people who are experts in either marketing, sales, admin, finance, operations. Like, there should be competent experts heading up each of those capabilities, and then they can contribute the best how to get that done. But founders oftentimes, when they've hired people that aren't better than them, they then are dictating into the how, and then they wonder why they can't break free from the chains of their agency, because they've essentially built what I call a superhero driven business model, where they're the superhero. So they had all the ideas, they had all the how. So now when the how isn't working all that right, they get sucked back in.
Mm-hmm. Have a few questions. Things are accelerating. So much food for thought. I'm really excited about this. First question: how, as an agency leader, do you set your ego aside to make that decision to hire someone that has more knowledge than you in a certain area that you need that knowledge to be applied? You know what I mean? It's like we're talking about that superhero role, and I think the slippery slope of going down that road is that you want to hire someone, but you don't want someone that's going to maybe outshine you or something like that. Is there a danger there?
Well, I think this works when founders finally get fed up enough. Okay. When they're finally fed up with not getting the results they want for their own success, then they become ready. And so if I come across a founder who's not yet fed up enough, then they're going to continue to sabotage themselves. They're going to continue to convince themselves like, oh, it's okay that we don't stick to this strategic business decision we made in our True North strategy, because they will bend the truth, if you will. They'll bend the story to make things work that clearly aren't in alignment with their business decisions, because they're not yet fed up enough. And so I think one has to be really clear on what they want out of the business. Look, there's no reason to own a business if you don't need anything out of it personally. It's just too much of a headache otherwise. Like, there's just no reason to do it. So I make sure that my founders, first and foremost, before we get into the business methodology stuff, why are you doing this? What do you want out of this thing? Where are you trying to take this? How is this business supposed to serve you? Because if we can't get crystal clear on that, then there is no driving force to let go. There is no driving reason to then let go and start to let people outshine you, because then the business is serving as kind of like ego validation. But if what we're able to point out is what they really want is to be able to go on, trips with their grandkids, and then now we're able to say, well, by you continuing in the mode you're going in, you're not going to go on trips with your grandkids. Is that okay with you? So we have to know up front, like, why do you even want to own this business? What is it supposed to do for you? And once we get clear on that, then we can make sure to build a business that can support those dreams.
Yeah.
And then it becomes a non-issue. Then there's just no choice but to methodically work on bringing about these 7 capabilities with people other than you.
Yeah. And when things align and when things click, that vision, that true north vision, can become a reality because you have more freedom to focus on direction over destination. Yes?
Correct. You have the freedom to focus on direction, putting the right people in place that
Yep.
execute better than you in specific capability areas. And then you as a founder get to focus on contributing towards a capability area where you are naturally good. So that might mean for a while that you also own a capability area, like let's say active lead generation. Maybe your executive team is small and aren't yet able to give that up. But as long as that's well suited to you, that you actually are very good at it and you enjoy it, then great, you're going to do that for a while.
Yep.
You're not going to just instantly decide tomorrow, especially if you have a small executive team or just a burgeoning executive team. You're not going to decide tomorrow that you're out of all the boxes except for one. No, you're going to be in multiple boxes for a while, but we should be methodically removing you from boxes that you aren't world-class at and that you don't enjoy.
Yeah.
That those have to go away first. And we have to go find the people that do enjoy it and that are world-class at that capability area.
Yeah. We've got a couple minutes left. I don't want to keep you too long. I know you're a busy guy. 2 quick questions. One is, having said all that, can you give me a specific example, whether it was working with Elevator or moving into forming Digitopia, where you had to make an adjustment to your own approach as a leader at an agency using that framework?
Yeah. So I'll give an example with a couple of examples. So one in sales, like I was always the company's best salesperson, but I realized as we were growing a team and we had someone really valuable in sales that really had the makings of being a leader, I realized that if I continued to be the rock star, that I was going to limit the company's growth. And so what we did is we elevated one of the team members to be the head of systematic sales process. And I'll never forget what it felt like the moment we were landing clients I had never met. That was amazing, to see that happen. Another example is we had one leader who was head of our world-class offering, which is operations, AKA client services, right? And it just wasn't
was that an Elevator or Digitopia?
Digitopia.
Okay.
And so it wasn't the right seat. This person actually was kind of mixed up with the person that was owning active lead generation, and the active lead generation person was actually, better suited for the world-class offering. And so we made that adjustment. And then like all of a sudden the team was happier and this executive was happier and things started to gain even more momentum. So it's really critical that whether it's a decision about yourself getting out of a capability area, or you've got someone who you're close to that, in fact, let me reframe the story on the systematic sales one. I forgot because it's been a while. I actually wasn't the lead of systematic sales process there. It was someone else. And that someone else happened to be, an important person in the company, but it wasn't the right fit. This person, that was not their superhero strength. And, we ended up promoting a person that was underneath this individual to that role because it was the right thing to do for the business. And those are not easy decisions. I mean, there are a lot of relationships in play and personal things in play. But it's really important. If you want a business that can run without you, then you have to do these things. You have to make sure that you don't put people in these roles that are just because they've been with the company a long time or just because there's a relationship in place. You want to put the person who's like a superhero at it. Like if I had to build an agency all over again, I would just go buy the right talent because there's just no it's not worth the headache and the additional time spent by just promoting the person that happens to be there the longest, or the person you happen to be buddies with. It's just, it doesn't result in a predictable business, and it results in a much slower moving business. So I absolutely would just go, they say, just go buy it, right? I would just go find the individual that is already world-class at that capability and bring them on the team. Instead of trying to figure it out on my own, instead of trying to figure out like, okay, well, what do I need to do to, standardize the service offering? What do I need to do to, have a consistent lead gen pipeline for this business? What do I need to do to make sure our finance is creating cash and profit optimization? Just go find the folks who that's what they do for a living. That's what they do.
Yeah. Get out of your own way, right? Just get the people that will do it.
Again, the thought exercise is, you own this business, you can no longer work in it. What do you do?
Exactly.
And when you do that, by the way, you then want to look at the 7 capabilities.
Yep.
And methodically go to work on them. And by the way, there's a specific order that you optimize those. By the way, we haven't talked about this yet, but there's a specific order that helps create momentum.
Mm-hmm.
And that order is true north strategy, then exceptional execution, then world-class offering, then systematic sales process, then active lead generation, empowered work experience, and finally cash and profit optimization. So when you optimize in that order, you spin momentum much faster, because that's the order where the one helps the next and the next helps the next, and so on.
You said something about integrator, and I wanted to know if that tied into EOS, or if it was something that was, outside of that framework, or if both the 7 capabilities and EOS had something in common.
No, just the quick answer to that comment about integrator. Integrator is an EOS term.
Yeah.
What I teach my clients would just be an alternative to EOS. That being said, the idea of 7 capabilities certainly is a lens you could overlay to any business system, whether it's EOS, scaling up, mine, whatever. So I use that because, in my opinion, a lot of folks who follow the visionary integrator model, they end up shortchanging what the integrator actually is. A lot of people I know that run EOS are looking for a fractional integrator. It's like, you don't go hire a fractional COO, because that's really what that role is. Like, and so I don't like what that integrator word has done and the whole EOS thing. EOS is a great system, but I don't like the lens on integrator, because a lot of people, they can just think that they can just hire kind of like an assistant person to run EOS. And it's like, no, that's the COO. so that's my, my thing there.
That's your quick take on it. Perfect. No, that's great. Frank, we went through a lot of stuff. Thank you very much. You're awesome. Loved the conversation. Loved the thoughts. All right. Thanks, man.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.